Good evening, everyone. It's 5:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Malini Sims. I'm a principal planner with the town, and joining me this evening are Bayer Vella, the planning and zoning manager, as well as Paul Melcher, who is the community and economic development director. Together, our aim as staff is to help facilitate tonight's discussion and support you throughout this evening. I see a lot of familiar faces, not seeing any new ones, but just in case I miss anybody, I do want to make sure that everyone's had an opportunity to introduce themselves. So is there anyone that this is their first resident working group meeting this evening? If so, please raise your virtual hand. Nope. All right. I'm not seeing, like I said, I'm not seeing anybody new faces. So I want to thank you all for your commitment to the process and for showing up tonight. So for tonight's discussion, we will not be using the Zoom whiteboard. Instead, we will be using PowerPoint as our workspace. So in a minute here, I am going to share some slides, give some brief background information, and then we'll get to the discussion. They aren't going to be shared though in presentation form, so I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. And this is so that we can make sure we're scribing your comments. So give me one moment while I share the slides. All right. So for tonight's meeting, the last time we all met, you guys participated in a great discussion that really gave us a lot of additional guidance to help craft goals, policies, and actions. Our focus tonight is to walk through those drafts to make sure they reflect what we heard over the last year, but also at your last meeting where you gave a lot of great additional guidance. I do want to emphasize that word draft, though, because these really are our first attempt to capture everything. The drafts will continue to be refined and will be sent out for everyone for further review. Tonight's focus, though, is really to make sure they capture everything, that all the paint's on the wall, if you will. So we are going to be walking through them and want to make sure that they not only capture everything, but if anything is missing or needs clarification tonight. Now, our aim for tonight is also to achieve consensus on these first drafts. So for those of you who were in the kickoff event, you helped define consensus. The responses are that you provided are shown on the screen. They include that we all might not agree to everything, but we can accept that they're headed in the right direction as being best for the community. So please just keep that in mind as we go through the discussion tonight.
Malini, do you see his comment? Can you go full screen?
So I can make it a little bigger. We're not going to go full screen tonight only because we are going to be using this as our workspace. But thank you, Gail, for speaking up. I will make it as big as possible, though. So I do want to just give a brief overview of what we mean when we say goals, policies, and actions. The goals, again, are the bigger picture, and they aim to address what are we striving for? What are the desired results? The policies are the bridge between the goals and actions, and they answer how do we get there? And then the actions are those detailed steps that will help achieve the policies. Now, the charge for a 10-year plan is to make sure our goals, policies, and actions are prescriptive enough to meet resident priorities, but broad enough to stay relevant over 10 years. And lastly, before we start our discussion, I just want to remind folks of the ground rules that everyone has accepted. I need everyone's help to make sure that this meeting's efficient and productive. We do have a lot to get through this evening. If you recall, even from the last meeting, we're going through those same topics again. So want to make sure everybody stays focused on the task at hand. I also just ask everyone to be respectful and help me if you hear anything that needs to be addressed or is against the ground rules to please let me know. All right, and let me work on move this up a little bit so you guys can see everything. All right. So again, our charge is to create a plan that honors what residents voiced over the last year. Now, the guiding principle is shown on the screen. You saw this last time, but it aims to capture the voices that were shared through a statistically projectable survey, as well as tables at events and comments made online. And Stephanie, just one moment, and I'll get to your question in one moment. Now, the guiding principle does aim to capture all of that information, and it is what provided the guidance for the discussion we had last week, as well as the guidance the discussion we're gonna have tonight. I will say at the end of this meeting, though, I do want to check in with the group to make sure that the guiding principle also reflects what was said over the last year and the last meeting, and to make sure it's getting it right. So before I go to the next slide, Stephanie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted you to know the writing is absolutely teeny. I mean, I have to get like 5 inches from the screen to see it.
Yeah, I understand. I will make it bigger when we get to the discussion.
Okay.
I will try my best. And the items that we're going to review for the discussion tonight, those were also attached in the email for this meeting. So please feel free to also, if you're able to, open it on your own device as well, if that will help. And then Mark, I think you had a question too. And Mark, you might have to unmute yourself. Okay. Mark, we'll come back to you if you are able to unmute. I do hear all of you though, so we will look into the format for the next meeting so that everything's easier to see on the screen. All right. All right, so for tonight's discussion, we have 4 areas to get through. I'll be keeping time, but please keep that in mind as we discuss each one. Again, we prefer to hear everyone's voice and see your faces. So if you can, I do ask that you please have your video on. It just helps us get to know one another. And also, please raise your hand to speak, and then we'll have you unmute. However, if you are more comfortable using the chat, please do so. The most important thing is that we get everyone's comments and questions tonight, regardless of how you participate. So during the last meeting, we focused on housing affordability, types, and ownership. We then continued the conversation about housing types. We also looked at the locations of 2 to 3 story apartment complexes, housing quality, and appearance. So we will walk through each one of those areas this evening. Now this, I do know you can't read any of the comments. Again, this was in that email, an attachment, and it's more just for reference. I really just want to remind folks of all the great comments you gave and the discussion we had last meeting. We first started off talking about concerns about the fit and compatibility of affordable housing in Oro Valley, subsidized housing not being a good fit in Oro Valley. We then talked about having more housing variety and density to help with affordability, as well as reducing costs of single-family residential. And then we wrapped up our conversation about housing affordability focusing on home ownership, specifically on what the state's doing to increase home ownership, land trusts, and financial education programs. All right, so I will make this screen bigger as we walk through everything. Just bear with me. So for the discussion tonight, we do want to focus again on the actions, policies, and goals, but let me just walk through how these tables are set up a little bit. So starting with housing affordability, types, and variety, what you see on the left side left column, the furthest left column, that's again the community guidance we heard last year, including the statistics from a projectable survey. There's also the state requirements on the bottom in the gray box. Again, many of the topics we're talking about tonight are legally required for us to address in the general plan. The green column, that relates to those whiteboard comments, and this summarizes what we heard from you last meeting a couple weeks ago. And then what's outlined in blue is our focus for this evening, and that is our first attempt to capture the left two columns through working actions, policies, and goals. So I do want to give everyone a moment to read through the actions, policies, and goals. And then I want to pose the question of, do they accurately reflect what we discussed a couple weeks ago? Or is there anything missing or anything that needs clarification? Okay, Rosa, and then Mark.
So I wanted some clarification on manufactured homes. Did we talk about that? I was just concerned. I don't remember talking about that, but I'm concerned about how a manufactured home would also comply with what we say about our high quality design standards and appearance. So the rest of it, it looks pretty, we did talk about patio homes, duplexes, townhomes, and all that, but that was my question.
I'd actually like to call on Hal, because I believe you spoke about this a little bit, you and Stephanie.
Yes, I did. I think I brought it up first, and I think Stephanie followed up. Just noted that we only have the one manufactured housing park in Oro Valley now, but it may be something you want to consider doing in addition to that in the future, because they do tend to be less expensive to build. And I think the language you have in there is appropriate.
All right, well, let's talk about that a little bit more. So thank you, Hal and Rosa. Manufactured homes did come up at the very end of our conversation. So what does the rest of the group feel in terms of including those as a housing type that Oro Valley should explore more? And Gail, your hand is up, and then Sue Allen.
My question was just a little more clarification. I want to make sure I understand. When you go to the far left and you talk about concerns, and is everyone concerned about affordable housing? And those are questions that you had asked because those were legally required.
So those questions, we did ask in a survey if people were concerned with housing costs, and 60% said they were. But the legal requirement is we have to have policies related to the improvement of housing affordability in the 10-year plan.
Okay, so during your questionnaire, you didn't ask them specifically, specifically ask the employers whether or not they'd be willing to pitch in to make it more affordable for their employees and stuff like that. You didn't ask them any follow-up questions, just asked them an open-ended question, correct?
So that question was to residents, but in the employer survey, no, we haven't asked employers if they would help subsidize housing.
Okay, and the only reason I bring that up is having a market research background, a lot of those questions are very ambiguous, obviously. And so if additional follow-up questions were asked, it would have maybe given us additional information, but that's all. Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then Sue.
Okay, hi. The manufactured homes, there is one, I think it's off Lambert. I'm not sure if that's exactly where it is. I think that's where it is. Anyway, that one's really nice. The people take care of their homes, but I think we don't need it anymore. And the reason I'm saying that was that there have been discussions in our neighborhood about that. And I just think of all the things that we can do. The manufactured homes probably isn't one we should look at. That's just my opinion. But I think that there are so many other options that we have, and we don't have that much land to develop other than if we annex. And I think if we annex, we should, again, get more single family homes. And one more thing is, if you'll notice on La Cañada, not La Cañada, anyway, what's the street right by La Cañada, the main one? Anyway, there are all kinds of new homes that are very affordable that are just being put in. I mean, like on either side of the street, La
Latoya?
Cholla. Yeah, it's La Cholla is where, I mean, there's all kinds of new homes, and they're look like they're going to be very affordable, but a whole lot of them. So I think what we're doing is we're really getting some good homes, maybe not right in Oro Valley, but certainly right near us. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. So yeah, you are right. There's a lot of homes going even in Marana. But our charge from the state is we have to have policies for homes in Oro Valley, or policies about affordable housing in Oro Valley.
Can I ask one more thing though?
Sure.
So you said it got to be like when the homes got to be about 50, or people got about 50,000, that's when the state comes in to tell you how many homes. Was there something like that?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to clarify. So once the population in Oro Valley reaches 50,000, we have to address housing in our 10-year plan.
And you
So
said that just happened?
Yeah, so that we're not at 50,000 yet. I think we're still around 49 something. But by the time this gets to the vote, or in the next 10 years, we will reach 50,000. So now we need to include it.
So that wasn't something that you guys thought about ahead of time? Like when you get to, if you want a certain like level of homes, maybe just stop it before you get, I guess that's just something that people didn't think about before? Or it's just that we're going to grow no matter what? The reason I'm bringing all this up is that, I mean, we are looking at a 10-year plan, and I know we're going to go over 40,000. We need to do that. But say like if we have more homes, then we need more streets, and then we have less of the plants and animals. I mean, it just seems like we're always talking about growth, and we're not talking about the things that bring people here. I mean, and I know that we're talking about homes and housing, but what I'm telling you is what the public thinks. I mean, I know you say, well, we've got all this data and everything, but seriously, people move here because they love the saguaros and the trees and the wildlife, and we just have to bring that up more, I think. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sue. And part of this discussion right now, you're right, we're focused on housing, but especially when we get to April and we start talking about development and the land use map, that is a great opportunity where we'll have those discussions of what does growth mean in Oro Valley? Is it targeted specific areas, things like of that nature. So, and you're right, and we do know that the environment is a priority for folks too. So it's balancing all of that together. All right, I'm going to go on to Cheryl, and then we'll go back up to some of those who have their hands raised but spoke. But Cheryl?
I just had a question. We just did the new ordinance so that people could build a supplemental home on their property that they currently own. I can't think of the wording for that, but we're very specific in the wording of that it had to be like custom built. It couldn't be a tiny home going in there or anything like that. So that's why I'm wondering about this manufactured housing. Wouldn't a tiny home be considered manufactured? And would it be possible that somebody could buy a property and then just put, 200 tiny homes on it, depending on the size? Is it manufactured or not? You can buy them on Amazon.
And maybe that's part of, maybe we do need to define, to your point, define what we mean by manufactured home as part of this. So it is clear of what uh, site delivered versus manufactured is what I'm thinking,
Yes.
you know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Rosa, we'll go back to you, and then Hal and Gail.
So this is quick. So when we said, because that was my question too, like, because I didn't remember maybe we talked about it at the end, but a manufactured home, would that require, maybe this is a question for buyer, would that require that all the homes in a piece of land be manufactured, and would it require special zoning? Because I think buyer said we only have one area that's zoned that way now. Was that what we mean by this? Like we would zone something for it?
So if I may jump in, Malini, so right now, Oro Valley has a pretty unusual construct, but it's obviously worked over the years. Manufactured homes where, literally it is made in a factory and essentially dropped off at the site onto a foundation is isolated to one zoning district. You can only do it in one zoning district. And we have one property that has that zoning district. So, and really bouncing back to Cheryl's really good point is that the line has really gotten blurred in what is manufactured versus site delivered, because you have what you think of as your traditional manufactured home, the double wide, okay? But on the other end of the spectrum, you've got these really expensive designer, top shelf, award-winning types of manufactured homes that, oh my gosh, are just as expensive as stick built. Open your Architectural Digest, you'll find ads for them. So there's this whole spectrum, really, really broad spectrum. So, and another way a line gets drawn is, I don't know if you guys have heard of barndominiums.
Yeah.
It's a term where essentially it's a large metal structure that's made in a factory, but it comes as a kit. Those are showing up in the air park area. And then they get furnished out like a traditional single family home. So it is a challenge defining, and our code, I think, is in a bad need of update to define what is what, because the industry has evolved so much. But as it stands now, pardon the long-winded explanation, Rosa, it is really isolated to one zoning district in Oro Valley for a traditional manufactured home.
Okay, so it would require a rezone of a parcel of land, and then it would require us defining what we want. Because I agree with you, there are some really nice ones, but you want to make sure that, it's still affordable, because the whole idea here was to get an affordable house. So maybe we just go back to townhomes and duplexes, and we get to the same place,
Okay. Let's hear, I think Hal, you were next, and then Gail, and then Sandy. Would like to hear from you.
Yeah, so Cheryl made reference to accessory dwelling units. And I don't think we touched on that at our last meeting on this topic. And I was aware of it, but I didn't want to bring it up because it's sort of a lightning rod. And obviously you're talking about putting additional units within single family areas. On the other hand, have state legislation that requires cities over, I think, 75,000 to allow for ADUs, accessory dwelling units. In fact, I think they have to allow for two on a lot, one detached and one attached. But since Oro Valley's not even close to 75,000 yet, it's not a concern. And I'm not sure what was done recently in terms of ADUs. I sort of lost track of that. So maybe you can inform me about that. But it seems to me that there's a lot going on in terms of ADUs at the state. I believe Marana allows for them. At least I'd heard that in the past. So I think it might be good to at least acknowledge ADUs somewhere in these action statements or policy statements. Maybe something like monitor accessory dwelling unit legislation and local implementation as it may affect Oro Valley, something like that. Because, you know, it's possible the state could come back and say, well, we need to do more regarding affordable housing. And so even smaller jurisdictions need to do it. I'm not convinced that they're an answer necessarily. You know, I've been watching ADUs for a while in various jurisdictions, and they generally don't get too well developed. There are some where it's been pretty popular, but in a lot of other places, not much happens. I don't think much is happening in Tucson. There's an effect for about 3 years now. So, but I think you should have something in there that addresses the fact that there are ADUs out there, and it may eventually come to something that we need to consider.
And if I may, Hal, just so you're aware, we did adopt an ordinance for ADUs in Oro Valley at the end of the year. It went into effect in January, and it was because the state law did require even our town to have ADUs.
So,
So
could you expand on that a bit and explain exactly to what extent you need to allow for them?
I believe they're allowed, and hopefully Mr. Vela will correct me if I'm wrong, but they're allowed on all single family lots now. They can be, so because we already allowed guest houses, that's why we now have to allow ADUs. So it just kind of expanded what we allowed for guest houses.
Well, I wasn't aware of that. So is there a minimum lot size that you have to have in order to have one?
No, there isn't.
Wow.
So
Okay.
the state was very broad in terms of what they wanted to see in all jurisdictions. So we matched what the state did for the most
Well,
part.
I wasn't aware of that. So that's, I guess, I don't know, maybe you should have something in there that just acknowledges that you've done that. Because I don't think most people are aware of that.
Okay. Thank you. Oh,
And one more thing, I did bring up at the last meeting toward the end, the idea of shared housing. And that's something that isn't necessarily government related. But, you know, it is a way of providing another source of affordable housing, maybe. It's something that you might want to have something that's like consider establishing a shared housing program in conjunction with local employers, something like that. I don't know that something you'd really want to do. I think there are issues regarding that. I know Pima Council on Aging considered doing something and they backed away from it for liability reasons, but something to think about. And that's all I got. Thanks.
thank you, Hal. Okay, Gail, and then Sandy.
Hi, I just wanted to add a little bit to what Sue said and also what Rosa said. Manufacturer's home, again, having a better definition would be helpful because again, I think of trailer park and I don't know that that would necessarily be desirable in Oro Valley, particularly since we have ordinances on temporary units, like specifically like double wides and stuff like that. I thought we had some ordinances that you can't have. Well, anyway, I'm misinformed. I think it's just for temporary units. Never mind. Anyway, but my point being is that I don't know that that's the best solution. And again, to go to Rosa's point, I think the fact is that in order to meet our design standards, I don't know that the trailer parks are going to be any more cost effective. So I think we just have to make sure that we, if we do make the mention of manufactured homes, that make sure they meet our standards. Because I just don't think anyone in the community is going to really support, oh, let's develop a bunch more trailer parks.
Sure. So maybe let's just give a moment. And I do apologize that the text is hard to read for folks. So for A1, that would be part of it, is creating the design standards for manufactured homes. If that helps kind of relieve some of the concerns. And then also to Rosa's question earlier, CD3, which is highlighted now on the screen, it will be looking at where are the appropriate locations for manufactured homes. But I hear you all that we also need to make sure we have a definition of those, of what was being meant by manufactured homes. So I guess with those things in mind, knowing that part of the actions would be having design standards to make sure the quality is there for Oro Valley, and making sure the locations for any potential areas are appropriate. And then of course we'll add something about a definition. Would that help? With that said, should manufactured homes stay in the actions or removed? I'm seeing some head nods. If you could either give a thumbs up or head nod.
No.
All right, I think I'm getting mostly no's from folks. So we'll look at that and remove those. All right, so outside of manufactured homes, again, looking at what's highlighted in outlined in blue. It is looking at, what we heard last time about affordable housing is making sure it's a fit in Oro Valley, that subsidized housing is not a good fit, but there are want for more types and density. And as Rosa pointed out, it was townhomes, patio homes, duplexes. And then for reducing costs for home ownership, it was also looking at a broad range of densities. So that's what the actions, policies, and goals aim to touch on. Are there any other comments, questions, or clarifications about those? And again, I just want to be clear that everybody, as a collective group, most people would prefer we drop manufactured homes. And I need a head nod or something. Okay, thank you.
Agreed.
All right, are there any other comments on this, on these goals, policies, or actions? Yes, Mike, we'll go to you. We haven't heard from you, and I apologize, Sandy. I apologize. Let's go to Sandy first, and then Mike. We'll hear from you two first, and then Stephanie, I do see your hand up, but we're going to go to those folks first. So Sandy?
My comment was, I think it seems like many people are not as happy with apartments because there's no individual ownership. And if there was a way that we could encourage condominiums or other kind of buildings where there is ownership, I think people might feel more comfortable with those kinds of developments. And that was my comment.
Okay. And for a lot of these, we didn't focus on the ownership aspect. So we'll have to, legally, the town can't require ownership. So that's one reason it wasn't specified in this one.
If I may, Melanie, I mean, I do want to also make clear, Sandy, that there are things we can do, like make sure there are zoning opportunities for condos and whatnot, because those opportunities are pretty limited. So, those are things we can embed in the general plan as action items to encourage home ownership, including condos. So,
Great, thank you.
sure.
Okay, then Mike, cool, and then Stephanie.
So my comment is that I like the direction this is heading. I think that we're identifying the solution here instead of the problem. And the way that I'm sort of seeing it is that we're talking about affordable housing without understanding where people meant. 60% is a lot of people that are concerned about the prices. So there's something there. But from my perspective, the thing that I think I'm hearing is that people are concerned about residents can't remain in Oro Valley, that they outgrow the place they're in and they can't buy a home to stay here because they love the community. I'd like to see that fixed. There might be a concern that people that work in Oro Valley can't afford to live within a reasonable commute. So I'm not concerned about someone commuting. I commute to work. It's like, that's something you do. But if we can't fill positions because they can't be within a reasonable commute, we should be fixing that. And then the third one, I'm assuming that I haven't heard anyone say, is there's also something about whether or not we can fund services. I don't think the goal is affordable housing. The goal is those three things plus something else. And I'd like to see that. I don't think the goal is affordable housing. It's that we want people to be able to stay in the community. We want people to be able to come to the community, work in the community, and we want to be able to keep Oro Valley the great place it is. And we have to figure out what that is. And so I'd just like to see a little bit of rewording in there. And then also explore, what did people mean? 60% of people said they were concerned about costs. What did that mean? Is it in one of those three categories? What is the other category? Because I can't even guess what the other category would be right now. That's my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So maybe I have to clarify your comment so we can understand the direction you're trying to give. So, so the 60%, it was a 1 to 5 scale of how much they felt it was a concerning. So the 40% just felt it as less as a concern. But when you're talking about, and you're right, those are you identified some of the needs, is that residents can't afford to stay here and workforce can't always afford to live here. We have to have fund services. So I guess this is our attempt to try to address some of those needs. So maybe can you clarify? And
Yeah, that I don't
everybody
think,
else understands it.
yeah, I doubt that manufactured homes
Okay.
will address even half of that 60% concern, that there's something behind it that we don't understand. Because I don't know if you have the statistics, how many people own their home here in Oro Valley? I have to imagine it's a very high number. So they're not the ones concerned about the cost of buying a house, the ones that own our house. Like my wife and I bought our place here because we're hoping to retire here. I commute downtown when I work and all that kind of stuff. And so I own my home. I don't have to buy another one unless I want to upgrade. So where is that concern in there? If it's that people can't afford to commute or the commute is too long, we want restaurants, we want good shops, we want to have good teachers. If they're the ones that are saying, I would love to work in Oro Valley, but I can't afford to, they're the ones we want to address their concerns. And so I think we have to understand what that 60% needs. And if it's manufactured home, that's great. But I'd be a little surprised if there's very many people on this call that voted to say they're concerned about the price. And so we need to figure out what that is, because we like the way Oro Valley is and we want to maintain that. What need are we missing? And I feel I cannot give any good input there because I'm not one of those 60%, but I want to make sure that people can work here, can upgrade here so they can stay here. If they've outlived their rental, I want them to be able to buy a home here because I want residents to be able to stay within the community. Those are my concerns. And that's sort of my input that when we say the goal is affordable housing, I don't think that's it. I think there's something behind that. And I think we would benefit from defining what that is. And if we don't know, then we need to ask that question of people again. We have to do a survey and say, hey, 60% of you said you can't afford to live here. What are we missing? Do you want manufactured homes? Let's do manufactured homes. I just don't know what it is.
Sure. So I think Buyer, you maybe wanted to respond. I see your hand up, and then I saw McKenna also wanted to try to respond to some of the comments you had.
Thank you, Melanie. I want to hear from McKenna too. So Michael, we did ask that question. What's the type of housing that folks do find in terms of the this genre of affordability? And it really came clear as, the missing middle of townhomes, patio homes, that sort of thing. We didn't pinpoint about that 60% to your point. That's why we have this group to help us define it. And I think we spent a lot of quality time last meeting, teasing out the word affordable, and distinguishing that from low income housing, that they're different things, and that affordable housing needs to be defined based on Oro Valley's incomes and needs. So there definitely is from this group a desire, I heard, to customize that. And it's not low income housing. It is workforce. We talked about that at the last meeting as far as a need. And I don't think you can discount the need with price. Price is a concern. There was an indicator in the survey that folks, there is price stress, cost stress when it comes to housing in Oro Valley. And in terms of a percentage that may or may not help, roughly 25% of folks in Oro Valley rent. A lot of those people are renting single family homes, not just, your 2-3 story apartment complexes. So I think that drives the bus on having a diversity of homes. And it surprises me not in the least bit to hear feedback from you guys that manufactured homes aren't appropriate. I've heard that consistently over the last 25 years that I've worked for the town. So that's not new, and we hear you folks.
And like, that would be my thought, that if a lot of people are renting a house and they'd like to buy a house, what kind of house would they like to buy? Because we'd like them to be able to live in Oro Valley, continue living in Oro Valley. I doubt it's a manufactured home if they're living in a rented home right now. And so that's just my thought, is that let's tailor this towards what we do know about what people want for housing. And unfortunately, like, I'm not one that can add to that. I'm going to shut up on it now. That's my input. I want housing for the people that live and work here so they can stay in Oro Valley. That's what I want.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And I think everybody definitely, I'm hearing the consensus that manufactured homes needs to be removed. So we hear you on that. McKenna, I think you had something to add to that, and then we'll go to Stephanie, then Dawn.
Yeah, hang on, let me lower my hand, sorry. I work with the Oro Valley Chamber of Commerce, for those that are unfamiliar. So I get a really great insight into exactly what you were asking about, like employers and employees and what they're looking for. I also am a young professional myself, so I'm in my 20s. I currently am living with my parents in Oro Valley because I'm one of the folks that cannot currently afford to rent in Oro Valley. So I know that is kind of unilateral across my age group and across the people that I interact with at work and in my personal life. So when we're talking about accessible and affordable housing, I understand because I'm the demographic that was asking for it within Oro Valley. I think the goal that I have when we're talking about finding accessible housing in Oro Valley, I agree that I don't think manufactured homes are necessarily the best option in Oro Valley, but I definitely agree that having more condos available, having more apartments available, and it got mentioned, I missed the last meeting because I had a work event, but I watched back the video and I heard that somebody mentioned having, I totally just lost my train of thought. Sorry. But having apartments that are affordable and having more opportunity is a really important and necessary thing. My easy, fun example that I like to give is I am a regular at a local restaurant, coffee shop, and out of their staff of 12, they only have one employee that currently is living in Oro Valley. Even the owners of that small business can't afford to live in Oro Valley, so they live outside of it. And two of their employees drive over an hour every day to go work at this job that's $1 above minimum wage. And so that's just, it's not accessible for them. It's not maintainable. And something that I think definitely could be fixed within this 10-year general plan of creating just more options for housing. And so by implementing more apartment complexes, then we would have that ability to make it more accessible for people. Again, having that greater supply demand would definitely help balance it out. And yeah, it's folks like me, it's folks like the people that I work with that are wanting housing in Oro Valley, wanting like a standard type apartment instead of a luxury style apartment, because over half of the apartments in Oro Valley are listed as luxury apartments. And so those just aren't as accessible. So it's not necessarily, creating housing that is, cheap and horrific, but just housing that is standard baseline. Because I mean, at this point in time, apartment rents are kind of almost even with monthly mortgage payments. And so again, that just is like so unattainable for so many of our working class people and people that are starting out and wanting to get out and wanting to rent and invest in our community, but just can't quite afford to get there yet. So those are the people that I think are responding to that question and are saying we need more accessible housing. We need more housing that's available to us so that we aren't having to drive over 30 minutes to get to work. I'm very blessed and lucky to get to live with my parents, but eventually I'd love to move out of my parents' home and to continue being able to live in Oro Valley and investing in our community. So I love to see that creating more accessible housing is something that's coming up, and I'm happy to answer questions about who is looking for these housing opportunities, because it's people like me. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, McKenna. And we will, we will get there tonight, but we will talk more about apartments separately, a little bit more further than these more low-rise housing types. So I do want to make sure we're giving people who haven't had a chance to speak yet an opportunity. We're going to go to Stephanie, then Mark, then Dawn, and Kim. So Stephanie?
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know the Highlands, which is the existing manufactured housing community here in Oro Valley. I was surprised to learn that in that community, those properties in there are all fee simple, meaning that they own the land under their manufactured home. So I think that's part of why that one is that community is so nice, because they actually own the property under their manufactured home. They pay property taxes on it. They can landscape it. They can make it look the way they want it to look. So, it's part of why it looks so nice. I think, part of what we've talked about is the need for communities that have a little more density in order to not have to perhaps annex additional land and lose some of our beautiful desert. Well kept, well designed mobile home communities can meet that need. And the difference between like an apartment or a condo even and a manufactured home is that for, a typical price for a manufactured home for, a full 3-bedroom, 2-bath manufactured home, and including the land under it here in Oro Valley, is about $225,000, maybe $250,000. And you cannot get a single family home size of a residence for that kind of money in Oro Valley any other way. So, perhaps there's an opportunity to look at manufactured home communities, providing it's ones where it is a fee simple community where people actually own the land under their mobile home. And so for that reason, there's that pride of ownership. There's that sense of permanence, unlike looking at it like a temporary community, like a quote trailer park, so to speak. There are ones where, they have, green belts between the homes, all different kinds of things. I mean, I'm just saying, I was very surprised to find out that community was fee simple, and it made a lot of sense when I saw how nice it was. I looked at a mobile home there when, for my sister who, is living with me right now and was considering, buying something. We looked at a mobile home over there. It was absolutely gorgeous. I mean, beautiful inside, looked absolutely like the most high-end house you could find, totally up to date, just really nice. So, it is an option. It's a way to create density and create homes that are large enough for families. Just a thought. And the last thing I'll say about it is, I said this last time, so I'm sorry I'm repeating myself, but I can almost assure you that the teachers and firemen and police officers who serve in Beverly Hills don't live there. And the young people who want to live in Beverly Hills and the people who work in restaurants in Beverly Hills can't afford to live there. I'm not saying that's an ideal situation, but sometimes communities are aspirational and it's something that you work towards. And maybe Oro Valley is one of those places. And, within very short commute distances, literally Marana, 10 miles, 10 minutes away, less than 10 minutes in some cases, there's very affordable, very nice apartments and houses. So it isn't like people are having to drive for hours like they do in Los Angeles or something to get to work. There's options, but I would, I personally have always disliked manufactured housing until I saw the one I saw, and then I went, wow, I would buy this in a minute and have it as a rental. So that's all.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. So I do want to get through those who haven't had a chance to speak yet, but I'm going to have to move us on so we can get through everything tonight. But with that said, just a reminder for folks, we do have to address affordability in our 10-year plan. And then also, we could definitely keep talking about manufactured homes, but what I'm gathering from folks though is there is a want to remove those from those from the actions. I'm still seeing a lot of head nods. So let's go to Mark and then Dawn and then Kim.
This is Mark. I'm troubled by the direction this group is going in. On one of your slides, slide 30 that you sent out, you have 24% of the people think apartments are needed, but you got 28% that want fewer apartments, less high density, less apartments, no rentals, limited construction of high density apartments. Since our last meeting, I've talked to 13 different residents and not one of them wants apartments or condos. They want single family homes. Now, I understand the affordability part of this, but the way to make things affordable is supply and demand, build more of them. So anyhow, again, I'm troubled about the direction. Oro Valley is Oro Valley. It's a desirable place to be in, and people are going to want to pay more money for the privilege of living here. And I don't see why we would want to devalue that.
Sure. So thanks, Mark. We will definitely get into the conversation about apartments here in a moment. We do need, I just want to remind folks, we do have to honor what we did here last year. And you're right, when it comes to apartments, it was almost a 50-50 split. So I know the last meeting, we really focused on really specific areas those may fit in and limiting the development of apartments. So I do want to get more into those goals, policies, and actions here in a moment, though. But I want to make sure we're finished up on this slide first. So I think it was Dawn and then Kim.
Thank you. One of the things that I think that we have missed to this point is the relationship between affordable housing and attracting businesses. We want to do both. And one of the things that businesses do look at when they are thinking about relocating to any area is there sufficient affordable housing to support the number of employees that we are going to bring in, and knowing the amount of salary or pay that they're giving to these people. So this is, there's more to this, and talking about, who is driving the affordability thing. if we are going to attract businesses within the confines, the physical confines of Oro Valley, then we are going to have to also take a strong look at where are the employees that they're going to bring here, what is their level of salary, et cetera, and we're going to have that, or they are never going to locate into Oro Valley. And I'll get into more definitive discussion about apartments, et cetera, later, but this does have a business attraction component to it when you start looking at affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. And absolutely. So we have you guys hyper focused on housing. There is another group who's focusing on business and workforce attraction. And I can let you know that there's a lot of overlap between what you're talking about and that groups too. So absolutely. Kim, I think you were next.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sorry my camera isn't on. I'm a commuter and I just got home, but and I'll be switching over to my laptop in a second. But I have been listening and, for the sake of, the ground rules and consensus, I'm hearing and you validated a few times already that that manufactured housing should be removed from the list of considerations for this portion of our task in addressing affordable housing. But I disagree, to the previous earlier speaker's comments, and apologize for not catching your name, and to Byers' comments as well. I mean, those concerns about, look and feel and aesthetic and home values, I think those can be addressed in the city code and zoning. So I just wanted to voice my position on that point, and that's all.
Right. Thank you, Kim. And so, maybe let me ask this is, okay, so I think we also we'll take Rosa and Cheryl, then we're going to move on to the next slide. So Rosa?
So I'm not gonna die on this hill if you want to leave manufactured homes in there and put some language around it where it's, well defined. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is, and we'll get into it, is that, we have land use issues, and we have the landowners who will build what they want to build, and there's only so much we can do to encourage even apartments, let alone manufactured houses. So we do have limitations. This is not our playground. We're trying to guide something into a right direction. And I just wanted to make a comment about being in your 20s and wanting to be independent. I have two 25-year-olds. Their birthday is Friday. Neither one of them has an expectation of owning a home in the next 5 years, but they're working towards it. One is finishing up her PhD, and the other one has been working for 2 years, and she's not ready yet. There's a lot to owning a piece of real estate, and you have to, work towards it. And you can Google, and there are plenty of articles about how many 20-year-olds, 24-year-olds, 26-year-olds are living at home with their parents. And it's just a reality of, the cost of housing everywhere, not just in Oro Valley, and just the way, society is right now. But, and yes, you have to have parents who are willing to support and understand that reality. So I just wanted to say that, the situation in Oro Valley, what we're trying to do and what we talked about last time was just get a reasonable set of affordable housing options on the plan. And we're going to talk about apartments and all that further, but these were the ones. And the only reason why I said to remove manufactured housing is because this has to be voted on. And I can tell you right now that the word manufactured home might turn so many people off. We won't get the required number of people to approve the plan. And that's my concern. We have to kind of represent the the people who do own real estate here and who would be concerned about that. But I don't think they would be concerned about looking for opportunities for condos, as Buyer said, because I think condos are preferable to apartments and townhomes and patio homes. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Rosa. Cheryl, you want to speak real quick, and then I'm going to move us on to the next one.
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to bring up, the whole thing with affordable homes, I think is going to be taken out of our hands by the state. There are 2 bills up there. One's already passed through the Senate, and the other one in Phoenix is still within committee. It may not get out, but also Governor Hobbs has indicated she wants something because there's a housing crisis in Arizona and we need more homes here. So they relate to single family homes, smaller lot sizes, and a whole variety of things that, change depending on who's talking about the bills. But nevertheless, it probably is it's kind of almost not worthwhile talking too much about the parameters of these things, because it's going to happen and it's going to come from the state, and we're just going to have to change our codes to apply. And that's how we'll get more homes out of it, if they have the smaller lot sizes that they want.
Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, there are a lot of state laws or state legislation out there about housing, but of course, also one of them that the state requires is that we address it also in our plan. Appreciate the comment though. So before I move us on, I just want to do one more check-in, because we've had a lot of great conversation about manufactured homes in both directions. So maybe a question I want to pose to everyone is, again, this is our first draft. We want to refine it. So if we were able to refine it in a way that really takes manufactured homes, creates its own action, and specifies how they have to be high quality, looks at ownership and really limited areas, would that be something everybody can accept? And again, thinking of that word consensus, and we'll be bringing that back to you guys to look at again, but maybe it's more that we need to take another try at it to give some more specification and address your concerns. Need a thumbs up or thumbs down?
Like, my input is, if the town says there's a demand for manufactured homes, I support it. But without that information, that doesn't sound like it's a good match for Oro Valley. And that's why I'm not thumbs up or thumbs down. I don't have the information. If you guys were to tell us that's what's in demand, I'd thumbs up. But unless you do, I agree with everyone else. Condos seems more appropriate.
I will say we did ask that question in the housing survey. So let me hold on just one moment. If that will help folks decide what to do on this, we can. So about 8% when we asked, and keep in mind, even 8% represents about 4,500 people. Did say that they feel that there's a high need for manufactured homes. So that doesn't mean exactly that they don't think they don't want them. It just means that they didn't specify that there's a high need for that type of housing. So if that helps. All right, so I'm gonna move us on. I guess, is it safe to say though that outside of manufactured homes, everybody accepts these first drafts of heading in the right direction? And we're all okay with maybe taking another look at manufactured homes? All right, seeing a lot of head shakes. All right, so the next set also related to affordability and housing types. And just give me one moment while I scroll us over to it, and I will be able to make this bigger here in a moment. Okay, so this was more about home ownership and what we heard, and Cheryl, it was a great segue, Cheryl's comment. We do know that the state legislation is proposing a lot of housing bills. And so there were comments about how to make sure that you as residents know what bills are out there, how they could impact Oro Valley, and then And then you could also decide if you want to engage your representatives. There was talk about a land trust and then also having financial education programs. And with this one, in terms of the guidance we heard from the community, it was very similar. People are concerned about housing costs, and then an open-ended question lowering rents. And again, our state requirement here is that we have city programs that promote home ownership. So again, focusing on, oops, I don't know, sorry, where my mouse keeps going. So again, focusing on what's kind of highlighted in the blue area. What we're focusing on is the actions, policies, and goals. I want to give everyone a moment to read through those. I am going to make it bigger for folks. And then what we want to know is, does this accurately represent what was said over the last year? What was said in the meeting? Is there anything missing or clarification needed?
Your working goal doesn't mention home ownership. I would think that belongs in the working goal section.
Okay. And this is our first one where it says duplicate. What that means is this was the same language we used on the previous screen. So I hear you though, Mark, that maybe for this one we do need a separate goal or something in there specific to home ownership. Okay, it's looking like most people are done reading. So are there any comments, questions, anything missing? Do we all accept that these are headed in the right direction? All right, I'm going to move us on then. So the second area, we kind of focused more on the housing types. We talked about how can we encourage more housing types in Oro Valley. The discussion focused on incentives, zoning, and annexation as all ways to have encourage more housing types. And so with that, under incentives, it was looking at that just different ways to encourage developers to build these housing types, knowing that most developers are going to build what is most marketable for and economically feasible. Looking at even the guidance from last year, and Michael, I think this might help answer some of your questions. We did hear that most people, 63% do want single-family homes, but there were 40% who think townhomes or duplexes are needed, and then just in general, in a separate survey, similarly, about 40% also wanted more housing types. And then open-ended questions, people wanted more housing types. And again, the state does require that we have policies related to improving the variety of housing. And so let me kind of scoot it over so I'm going to try to make the view so you guys can all see it a little bit better. But again, looking at these goals, policies, and actions related to incentives, looking at zoning, we did talk about needing to have an annual report or more information for residents to know even what our housing stock is. We need that to be able to plan for the future. There was discussion about Oro Valley Marketplace and that rezoning being in the right positive direction and opportunities to maybe do that elsewhere with other commercial areas. So that's kind of what's all captured in that middle box. And then lastly, looking at annexation as an opportunity to get more housing types since we are almost built out. So it's using those annexed properties to incorporate that diverse range of housing types. I want to give, again, everyone a moment to read through this. And Rosa?
So when I read this, the only thing that jumped out at me is so evaluating commercial land as a plan and deciding that, you know, these would be good places for apartments can be a little bit sticky. Because if you've been around for any of the recent rezones or attempts, I mean, people have very strong feelings about where apartments go. So I was a little concerned about that. And the second thing, it just jumped down, was the annexation strategy. I wanted some clarification on that. My understanding is that that is set by council, that the annexation plan for the town is set by council, and we currently have one, and I think we said that we would get a copy of it once we started looking at the land use maps. So the wording might need to reflect that, you know, we would be working with something that's been established by the council. It isn't established in the plan, or am I wrong?
Yeah, so I can clarify about the annexation strategy. So it is something that the council approved. The last one was approved, I want to say 2020. So this would be to make sure we're updating it. So it would still go back to council, to your question, but we want to make sure it's updated periodically, would be the aim here, versus creating one, because to your point, there already is one.
So the supporting annexations, that would be that are economically beneficial, that would be based on the strategy that is in place or is updated. Because my understanding is there are certain criteria that they put in there to not necessarily benefit housing as much as to benefit the economic viability of the town. So that was my question. Will we be able to see this strategy so we can understand how it addresses housing? Because my understanding is it's always more addressed the financial viability of the town.
Yeah, so that is correct. And so that's where I2 tries to make sure that diverse housing ranges are incorporated in it. And the housing strategy is online now. So I will send out a link to that because it's available to the public, which is unique for jurisdictions to do, I will say. But I will make sure we get that out to you all so you can see it. But that, to your point, yes, it's looked at in a lens of the revenue sources and sales tax and everything like that to make sure it is economically beneficial. Housing isn't at the forefront, and that's I2, and maybe it's not doing it, I'm not saying it is, was the attempt to make sure that if places are annexed, it's addressing housing in some way with those diverse housing types. And Cheryl?
Could you just expand a little bit on this FG3 plan for present and future housing needs?
Sure. So so right now the state is currently requiring, they just started requiring this. Every year the town has to send an update on our inventory housing stock, and every 5 years we have to do a housing plan. So we're required, so this aims to reflect that. We didn't want to specify what the state's calling it, because who knows what they'll call it in 10 years. But that would be the aim there, is that we're routinely updating our inventory of housing and then what our plans are to address any housing gaps.
Thank you.
Other comments on these or questions? And maybe let me ask the group about the which should be FG4 if there's FG3 twice, but the one Rosa brought up about identifying areas, evaluating identifying commercial land where higher density may be a use. So we did try to word it in a way that it is supporting the nearby commercial, like Oro Valley Marketplace, like what they did. But is there any more comments on that one or direction for that? And I do want to mention that buyer, thankful, just put a link to the annexation strategy in the chat for you folks. Tony, haven't heard from you yet.
Are we always going to be pursuing the marketplace as a viable marketplace? Or that perhaps this is the place to put the condos and townhouses that we need?
Sure. So right now for the marketplace, in efforts to try to improve their viability, they are approved to have apartments and hotels in there. So those are going to start being constructed to help increase.
It seems to me it's been just what do I want to call it? Not a white elephant, but something that we haven't been able to make this successful as a commercial place, but that perhaps it would meet some of our housing needs.
Sure. So that is approved to have housing. So you'll see construction out there. Yeah, you're going to start seeing it in the next couple of years where they're going to be putting in housing. Yep.
While I'm still alive and living in Oro Valley.
And then we're going to go to Robin. We haven't heard from you, and then Hal.
Okay, so all I was going to ask was, what is the definition for like commercial areas? Because like we know when we talk Oro Valley Marketplace, right? Or maybe the Target, what's that, Rancho, whatever that's called, the Target shopping center area. But what about, do we consider the like the town hall area, like Naranja and La Cañada? Do we consider that a commercial area? Like what will be defined as commercial area? Is it just that if there's some particular any business there at all, does that become a commercial area? That was my only question.
Thank you. So, and please, everybody, correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding from our last meeting was these were really where retail and restaurants were to help support those types of businesses. So town hall, for instance, wouldn't be included in that. And I'm seeing some head nods, so I'm hoping I'm representing you all correctly. Hal?
Yeah, in regard to the last question, I'm not sure that it was limited just to retail commercial. I mean, in my mind, it could also include office commercial. So you might want to expand on that or clarify. To me, it should be both retail and office commercial. And other than that, I think the language of FG, which should be FG4, is fine.
I could ask a clarifying question. What do you consider as office commercial? And versus just a straight up office or a service being provided?
Hal, I think that question.
Oh, is that addressed to me?
Yes.
Well, office commercial, I mean, there's a number of commercial zones that the town has, and probably Muini or Buyer could address those better than I could, but some of those are more related to professional offices, for example.
Maybe you're thinking insurance agents, architects, dentists, and it's office commercial.
Right. In fact, from my point of view, I think I made this comment in the last meeting, or maybe it was my written comment, that actually office development and residential development can be pretty complementary in terms of shared parking, because the parking demand for the uses offset. During the business day, you have higher demand for offices. During the evening, is higher demand for apartments. So you can reduce the total amount of parking you need in that situation.
I just wanted to make sure I had the same understanding.
Thank you both. Okay, so what I'm hearing is these we all accept as heading in the right direction. We will need to better define what's meant by nearby commercial areas. Okay, I'm gonna move us on. All right, so now is where we talked about limiting to limiting 2 to 3 story apartments. So this conversation we did first start out of asking folks how to define apartments, how you define apartments, and it was what I heard was that they're 2 to 3 stories, very compact, your typical apartment complexes. And the conversation did focus on limiting or positioning these next to major roadways, again, near shopping areas, and then also making sure they're distant and away from existing single-family residential subdivisions. And so, as Mark pointed out before, we did hear from the survey that it was almost 50-50 of 24% think apartments are needed, and then 28% want less apartments. So again, that's why we really wanted to focus this conversation on limiting them to specific, to focus on what areas they could fit in. Because we also heard that folks do agree they should be in areas that have access to shops or along major roadways. So looking at that, what we heard from you all last year was kind of in line with what the community said over the past year in terms of being along Oracle, and as Hal pointed out, even for these larger apartments being next to employment centers, and office areas, retail and restaurants, and then again, not near existing single-family residential subdivisions. So focusing on more your 2 to 3 story apartments. Here are the goals, policies, and actions. So I'll give everybody a moment to read through these, and I can get it, I think, a little bit, maybe not. Closer. So Tony and then Hal. Tony, did you have your hand up?
You talking to me, Tony
Yes.
King? No, I didn't, but I will have something to say. I think we're limiting ourselves to 3-story apartment communities. If or make these 3-4-story condos or whatever. I just feel limiting us to 2 or 3-story apartments. We're not going to really accomplish a lot.
Okay.
Should I lower my hand? Okay.
Oh, I can do it for you. Don't worry about it.
Okay. I didn't know my hand was up.
Hal, I think you had a.
Yeah, the only thing that gives me a little heartburn here is the use of the word significantly distant in policy B, as well as the second bullet point under BC1, action BC1. It sort of implies that you're going to have a big distance between single family and apartments. I don't know what that would mean, though. I think that people may expect, well, it's going to be a quarter of a mile away or something like that. I don't know. So I'm a little concerned about use of the word significantly, maybe adequately distant, and then obviously ultimately the council could have to interpret what that means. But significantly, I don't know. I'm a little concerned about the use of that term.
Thank you. We'd love to hear from the rest of the group about maybe the terminology in that one specifically, especially those of you who that was your comment. I know there are a few of you who your comments were that these types of housing need to be away from single family homes. So Mark and then Leah.
Sorry, it took a second to push the speaking button. I think this word significantly belongs there. There's nobody I've talked to that wants apartments. But if we have to have apartments, I think people want a significant distance between the apartments and single family homes.
Thank you, Mark. Leah, then Robin, then Dawn.
I am personally not against or for the word significant, like in the way it's used in the policies. I think we should maybe just consider using a word that can be like interpreted the same for everyone. I understand and agree with like the significance of the distance, but I just don't know if the word significant, like as the word, has like different interpretations depending on who's reading it and their like personal bias and opinions they're reading it with. If that makes any sense, I don't know, but
No, absolutely. Thank you. Dawn, I think, and then Robin.
I too share the concern over the word significant for several reasons. One, it's one of those words. In fact, when I looked at the statements, it said near, and I thought, what does the word near mean? What it means to me may be totally different from what it means to someone else. But when you're sitting on the Planning and Zoning Commission and you're sitting there listening to people argue about, or let's not use the word argue, let's call it discuss, what is significant and what is not significant, and what is near and what is far, you end up with a whole lot of discussion and nothing ever gets solved. And then people, I would come up, and I know this is difficult to do, but I would come up to say with a minimum of a quarter of a mile or something like that, and say, and a half mile away is sufficient. When you go to significant, you're just opening up a box of worms. And I'd also like I keep hearing people say, I talk to a whole lot of people and they say they don't want this or they do want that. I'd really be interested to hear what some of the specificity of the comments of that, like, why does it have to be a significant distance from, why does an apartment have to be a significant distance from a single family residence? I'd be really curious to hear some of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. And I do want to, I hear you all that the wording needs to be clear enough that we know how to carry it out and implement it. But also maybe we need to be cautious of not being too specific, right? Because it's a 10-year plan and we don't know exactly where these will go in 10 years. We've talked about annexation. So there could be a lot of scenarios that come up in the next 10 years. So I would cautious us from being super specific of putting a exact measurement, right? And and I think Buyer, you may have had a comment as well.
Yeah, Melanie, I was essentially going to say the same thing, because keep in mind, gang, that significant could be a short distance between the apartment and a development, but there happens to be a massive hill in between the two, and you can't see, one party can't see the other, okay? That could be significant. Let's say there isn't a hill separating the two. Maybe it's, you do need further separation in terms of the number of feet. So like Melanie, I would caution buttoning it down, because you want to factor in terrain. And the other thing to keep in mind too is, in terms of honoring what we heard out there, was folks wanted us to limit them. All right. So how do we limit them? What this is proposing, we limit them by being very selective where they're positioned. Okay. So we're trying to do this dance of balancing those for and against. And I think, sorry about that.
Oh, thank you. He'll be right back to finish his thought.
Say he had a frog in his throat, but
Yeah.
it sounded more like
Oh.
a wolf than a croak.
Thank you. Let's go to Sue. And then we'll see if Byer's back by then, but Sue?
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a housing development on Lambert and La Choya on the northeast side. And I did go to those meetings on that, and I think the word significant is significant because the room was packed with people, and they all thought that it was very important to use that language. And they wanted a division between the high density and the homes that are now built there and the homes that are the single family homes that are going to be built there. So I think the word significant is important.
Thank you, Sue. And then Byer, did you want to finish your thought? I don't know if you know what track you're on now. Okay. Let's go to Robin and then Cheryl.
Okay, so I think a lot has kind of gone on since I was waiting. And so I think I agree with everyone that, understanding what significant means is important. And I do understand what Bayer is saying about like, it might be a hill or it might not be, it might be a distance sometimes. And when you're saying it might be restricting for us to do that too. As a member of this, I just want to make sure I'm looking out and then what I perceive to be, right, significant, that I'm making sure that I'm supporting people who want to be sure there's a big distance. And so earlier when I asked, like, I know at like Naranja and La Cañada on the, let me see, like northwest corner of, there is a place there that's not developed yet. Across from it is businesses, across from it, kitty corner to it is the town hall and the library. But there's homes that back right up to that. And so that's the kind of thing, like, I mean, am I allowing an apartment complex to be built in their backyards, like where they used to have views or something? I don't know. Anyway, so I don't really know what the answer is because I totally understand what you're saying and such, but whatever we do, we just have to make sure that we ultimately start to explain to people what we mean as, significant and protective.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Okay, Cheryl, Gail, and then Hal.
On the major roadways, I think we can pretty much all agree that Oracle is definitely one of them. But I'm wondering what other roads we would be considering as major. Like, would it be Tangerine, La Cañada, La Choya? Can you maybe expand on that a little bit? Because I think some of those other roads, which are significant to us, but maybe a lot less traffic than Oracle. And would we be stepping on people that don't want apartments, as they've said, on some of those corridors?
Yeah, so what we heard last time was roadways, and to your point, that have access to shop, services, and employment. So I guess maybe let me ask the group, roadways did you guys have in mind? I hear you that I do know Oracle came up, but there is, to your point, there could be other areas that still meet that criteria, if you will, where there's shop, services, and employment. So maybe what are your thoughts, or even anybody else in the group of other roadways?
Could you just say any four lane road? Is that, or if it's got 4 lanes, it's widely traveled? I don't know.
Okay, so maybe there needs to be a little bit more information there as well. And Robin and Sue, I saw you both raise your hand. Do you have some thoughts on major roadways? Robin, you're muted.
That's sort of what I was talking about when I brought it up, is like La Cañada and Naranja, or, I mean, Naranja's not 4 lanes yet, but we talked about that earlier too. But like that corner particularly there, I think it would be good if we could identify what are those roadways.
Okay.
And what I was going to say was that I think that we have to really be careful on La Cholla. And I think also, well, mostly La Cholla, there are a lot of single family homes there. And I know that, being that I told you about that public meeting I went to, a lot of people are really upset about the fact that we are going to be putting high density homes on the corner of La Cholla and Lambert Northeast End. And I think we just have to realize that that's not as busy as Oracle, whereas everybody could expect Oracle to have apartments on them. It's just expected. But when you're getting to be on too many single family homes, I think you're going to get a lot of people not liking that.
Sure. Thank you, Sue. And yeah, and I think also to your great comments is that's why we do want to make sure that we're specifying it's maybe if it's still not everywhere along a major roadway, right? You still need to be near the commercial areas and distant away from single family homes. So trying to capture both of those still. Okay, let's go back to Gail and then Hal and then Dawn, and then I'll move us on to the next one.
Okay, my comment was about significant. I do believe it needs to be better defined. And I don't know, I also make another comment that once the area is zoned a certain way, that there's not a lot planning. I mean, once it's zoned a certain way, plan and zoning has to approve it. So at which point I would recommend perhaps we change some of our zoning language that says to the effect of that if you're going to build apartments, there has to be the maximum allowable distance, and I'll leave it up to zoning to determine what that maximum allowable distance is. So maybe our phrase is that it's the maximum allowable distance between apartments and homes as allowed by zoning requirements. And I think it would be appropriate to also include there or include buffers, site buffers, so that you're not looking directly at that. I think it'd be worthwhile specifically stating those things and leave it up to zoning to define the zoning department to find how to do it. Because if it's not in zoning, they can't enforce it.
Got it. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Hal?
Yeah, I want to get back to the significant issue as well. And I guess I'm gonna have to concede on that, and we'll leave the word in there, but in his explanation, Bayer also mentioned the example where there was some kind of a topographic difference or some kind of a hill between the proposed development site and the existing single family. Maybe distance isn't the right word, maybe separation. I think that's the word that Bayer used is a better word. So significant separation might be the better term to use because you can have some topography that provides a buffer or a barrier between different densities.
Great. Thank you, Hal. And then Dawn.
I think just by default, when we're talking about what roadways we're talking about, I think if you just look at the geography of Oro Valley, by default, we're talking about La Cholla, La Cañada, and Tangerine. That's the only major roadways that we call all of those major roadways. Obviously, there's only so much space along Oracle, so I think those are the roadways that people were talking about when they talk about where apartments should be located or could be located. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, and then Gail, I don't know, did you have your hand up again? No, okay, no worries. And then Sue, and then I'll move us on.
Yeah, I want to keep significant distance. I think that's it's more specific than the other one. I I know we can't get too specific because there might be hills that make it appropriate distance, but I think the word distance and significant, you get in your mind what that is, and I think then we could work with the very specific amount of space. I really do appreciate the significant distance. I think that's appropriate wording, my opinion.
Okay, thank you. All right, so knowing that we need to work on that wording as well as the major roadways wording, is everyone in agreement that these are headed in the right direction?
Yes.
So I'm going to move us on to the next item, which we discussed. This was about housing quality and appearance. Oops, sorry. There we go. So there's a lot of discussion about how HOAs are factored into that versus what the town can do. So looking at those, again, what we heard over the last year was that there is a value and appreciation for the look of the built environment in Oro Valley. And state law does require that we do have a component that addresses the improvement of neighborhood appearance, but also that includes the buildings. So what we heard from you all last time was HOAs do a really good job of enforcing standards and making sure that homes are maintained. But there was an awareness that not all HOAs are the same, and some may not have those standards in place. And then, of course, those areas that aren't within HOAs, what the town can do to make sure that standards are maintained. And again, this would be not so much during the development process, so not the design standards that all new developments are to, but after 20 years, 30 years down the road, making sure that those homes stay in good quality. So I will scroll over and try to make it a little bit bigger. But if you take a moment to look at these actions, policies, and goals, and Sue and Hal, I see your hands up. So Sue. Hal. I don't know. I think Sue, can't tell Sue, are you muted or did you put your hand down?
I put my hand down, sorry.
Okay. No, you're good. And then Hal.
Okay, this hopefully will be my last comment of the night, but in terms of quality, I mean, you're looking at, I think, exterior design. But one thing that we might want to think about here is, and I've mentioned this before, we have a high percentage of older adults in this community, over a third are over age 65. And those people, assuming they continue to live in the community, are going to age to the point where they may need a kind of house that is more accessible for them. I don't think that's anything necessarily that the town can regulate, but they might want to work with local home builders and maybe some kind of a certification plan to encourage universal design or accessible housing where you don't have a lot of steps, and then there's other design features that allow for older adults to live comfortably. So again, not regulation, but some kind of a set of standards, certification by the town of housing that could be advertised as accessible for older adults as well as people who are disabled. Again, this would be an interior issue for the most part, not an exterior in terms of design.
Thank you, Hal. And then Randy, I want to also thank you for your comment in the chat. So we did get that regarding significant. Other comments, questions, or additions to these ones? Okay, do we all, oh, Cheryl, sorry.
Oh, just a quick thought. I remember at one point in time, there's a development of, I don't know if they're duplexes or what. It's located down Oracle Road, like on the opposite side of the road of maybe of where the Kohl's shopping center is in that area. I don't remember the name of it. I think that's Mountain Vista or Mountain View that you would turn back to get in there. And they're older. It was annexed into Ora Valley. And I remember this person was talking about thinking that that was kind of a blighted area. I don't know that I would consider it blighted. They're older, but the people in there seem to keep them fairly nice. And so I'm just wondering, with this working goal of supporting efforts, like what would that entail? I mean, it doesn't seem like Ora Valley can do anything financially, and the people can only afford to do so much because, well, I don't know. But that was just my question on that one. Like, what could we possibly do in that area?
Yeah, so part of it definitely could be first having up-to-date codes so that we can at least work with homeowners to help improve the quality. We do have in here implement programs and services to help assist, but we haven't further defined that. I don't know if Mr. Vela has anything to add.
Sure. So one is keeping up our property maintenance codes, that allow the town to get involved if there's excess weeds or there's junk that needs to be cleaned up in the front yard, that sort of thing, or the house is just outright severely dilapidated. The town does have the authority to act through our property maintenance codes. The other thing, Cheryl, one example that we've done in the past, we haven't done it in a long time, where in areas that seem to be more distressed, where cleanup's needed, the town has put out dumpsters for those areas, and worked with the HOAs to do a big, cleanup weekend event. And we're out there and we're helping folks, and we actually would have staff out there helping folks, especially elderly, get it over there and get rid of their junk. So those are just some examples of the code part is something we do believe it or not, we use that more often than you might think, including in Rancho Vistoso. But the dumpster program, I know we used in certain areas on the south side of Ora Valley. So that, and they were really appreciated. But it is a cost. It's a cost to the town. So.
And okay, Rosa?
Maybe beef up the language and the actions with some more specificity, like, what we're saying, we're going to provide information to HOAs and identify gaps in the code, maybe to add things like recommended painting schedules, recommendations with what, updating landscaping. I think the biggest thing that I see in older or in homes that have been around for a while is that there are some homes in my neighborhood in which the original builder landscaping that was put in 18 years ago is still there. And it isn't nice looking. Like the trees are, whatever branch needed to be chopped off has been chopped off, and the tree's leaning, and like there's hardly any rocks in the front yard. So like that kind of thing really can, there's no violation, but it's tired looking. And then there are some homes that are original paint for 18 years in my neighborhood. even though, you know, they enforce the mailboxes because they're right there on the road. But yeah, I can point out a few houses that have the original paint. I painted my house twice, okay, in 18 years. So, you know, I mean, there's that kind of thing I think really helps, just a fresh coat of paint and just like less tired landscaping. So if there's a way that we could make some specificity in the suggestions or the code or some guidelines, that might help, because you know, yeah, we all know what a neglected property looks like, but there's like a few that are a few steps away from neglected, if you know what I mean. So, and it does make you know, it doesn't look like it did when the neighborhood was built. Let's just say that. So there's a big range in there, but if we could tighten it down a little bit, I think that would make a lot of people happy.
Yeah, thank you, Rosa. Okay, and I got all of your comments down. Other comments on this one, Randy?
Yeah, I think one option to consider is we have volunteers to clean up highways. Would it be appropriate to contact some service agencies to see if they'd be interested in helping with dumpsters, or maybe picking up trash, or helping folks with landscaping if they need that kind of help? I know the town doesn't have a lot of resources to do that, and it takes a while. So maybe there's a way to get some community involvement if we're really concerned about our community, and taking care of it in a more volunteer fashion.
Great, thank you, Randy. Okay. So I don't see any more hands up on this. So everybody in agreement that these are headed in the right direction? Again, we hear you that some of these things do need more definition, so it's clearer. Okay. So the last area I wanted to circle back to with everyone, and I'm gonna focus really on the actual guiding principle, is we do want to check in with you oops, about the guiding principle. Want to make sure that, you know, based on what we heard last year, the discussion we had tonight, and the guidance you gave us, is there areas on the guiding principle, which that is the orange boxes to your right, is the actual principle language. Is there refinement needed here, or any changes? Or do you think that these do still adequately encompass all the direction from residents? And keep in mind, they are meant to be higher level as guiding principles. Kim?
Yeah, so looking at limit construction of new high density apartment communities, we've had a robust discussion about that tonight. I'm thinking, is limit the right word? Is it moderate, or consider? Struggling to think of words, but is limit the right word?
I would ask others in the group your thoughts on that. But we'll go to Mark first. And maybe Mark, you may have a thought on that too, but.
Yeah, I don't know. Limiting, I think, is the objective of that box there. But my comment was, we talked before about striving for higher home ownership, and it's not listed in here. And I think that somewhere in there, I would think that it belongs.
Okay. Other thoughts about the word limit with regards to high density apartments? I did see McKenna, you added to the chat.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I'm right there with Kim where I'm like, I can't think of the right word, but I agree that reading that felt like, um, to me, that feels like no high density apartment communities. Whereas I think that, you know, when we're talking about like the marketplace, that was some place that we had said like that would be a good fit, right? To have that higher density. And so the word limit to me just feels a little bit tricky there. Because I understand the goal of it would be trying to say, you know, we don't want high density all over, but maybe instead it could be something like, you know, emphasize construction of like other high density options. I don't know, something along those lines, like trying to still get the point across, but wanting to make sure that it can't get turned into like no high density housing. Because that's, to me, that's where I like see limit as like really forcing against it versus there's specific places where that would work well, right? So it kind of, yeah, gave me some hangup.
So I wonder, to both of your comments, and I'm not saying this is a solution, but a thought is based on the conversation tonight and your comment, McKenna, is maybe we need to look at combining the limit new high density apartments with the selectively target areas. And that would help
Yeah.
maybe hone in the
Yeah.
conversation that was even held tonight.
Yeah, I think that that kind of like lines up a little bit better. I know that Bear just mentioned in the chat too, like limit locations instead of just like limit construction overall. And I think that that's also a good thought, like, you know, because then that fits in with that as well. So I think both of those are good agreements to where it's not limiting the construction overall, but still wanting to make sure that it's fitting. Yeah.
Okay, then let's go to, I think we have time for Stephanie and Rosa.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, maybe what we want to say is something like in considering high density housing, rather than, you know, saying limit apartments, just say in considering high density housing, give priority or strive to give priority to condos and townhomes, you know, because that's really what people are saying. They're not saying they don't want high density housing. They're saying they want to see ownership if possible.
Okay, thank you. And then Rosa.
I agree with that. And I also wanted to state that we do already have in the pipe like over 700 apartments that are already approved. So it's not like there are no high density, and Marketplace will get a good bit of that high density. But there are other locations. There's Rancho Vistoso and there's Westward Look. There's other places already approved without any type of zoning that would need to take place. So I would say that maybe combining is a good idea, Malini, like just saying, you know, selectively target areas for some high density apartments and or condos, you know, in areas where there are shops and services, something like that. But I agree that there should be something in there about condos, because that's the big thing everyone asks for when a property owner comes forward with apartments. They ask for condos because they would rather see home, you know, some type of home ownership. So just knowing, I've attended so many of these like meetings, and that's the first thing that gets argued out. Why can't you build condos? So maybe fit that in there somewhere.
Thank you. All right. Really appreciate the conversation tonight. I want to just quickly show you guys, and we won't go through these. Oops. I can get my slideshow back up. Sorry. So just want to quickly touch on that there are the legal requirements we have to meet. And so with these goals and policies and actions, we are able to make sure that we're touching on all of our legal requirements. But knowing that we will continue to refine those to meet them. We did touch about a lot of these in the conversation, so I don't want to take too much time. Again, I do want to thank everyone for the great discussion and congratulate you all. That was a lot to get through, but I appreciate everybody giving both sides of all their thoughts on that, and then also making giving some really great changes and suggestions for refining. So I just want to make sure though, last time with everyone overall, what I heard is that the first drafts though are headed in the right direction, knowing that they need some refinement. So head nod or thumbs up if that is accurate. All right. So your next meeting is next Wednesday. It is going to focus on the transportation goals, policies, and actions. And I did hear all of you very well tonight that the PowerPoint workspace does not work and makes it hard to read. So we'll probably go back to the whiteboard for next week so you can adjust your view. But we'll really, though, run through the same format, essentially. We'll go through each one. You'll give your comments. So tomorrow morning, look out for an email. I'll be sending you the RSVP for Wednesday, the draft goals, as well as the Zoom link. And so with that, I want to thank everyone and hope you have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.